lot of people. Like if you're doing it for business-wise, you're upping the consequences of everything you do. So there's, you could be doing it for money, or you could just be doing it because you want to be creative and you do that in your spare time.
I mean, if you're out there to make big money, then you're in the wrong business entirely, right? I mean, you should be investment banking, right? Something similar.
I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, though, and say, how are you paying for it?
Self-funding. So far.
That was easy.
Hello. All right, I've always been indie. I've always worked for an indie studio or another since about 1993. Some of those studios are no longer indie studios, having done something else or been bought by larger studios. But so Eitan asked me to skip the first part, which I didn't. The second part, how are we funding our games? Through our games. I think we're very lucky that the games that we have written are keeping me from losing my house and eating ramen.
Okay, so when you're making a video game, there's always a very big consideration of what platform do you want to release on, right? And so, I know that was a slip, but what platform do you want to release on with this game? And so, there are a couple, I guess, notable platforms. You've kind of got like the platform, the iPad, the iPhone, the iPod Touch. You've got, I would say, the different consoles out there. You've got some sort of mashup of Steam and PC and Facebook, which is all kind of another platform or separate depending on how you look at it. And maybe there's other stuff. If you're really crazy, maybe you want to release on the Atari because you're, making logos. So I'm glad I got a couple laughs. So there are multiple different consoles. Again, platforms that you can go to. Which ones do you think are particularly sustainable for indies to develop on? And I'm going to start with Ichiro because he made good faces.
Okay, sustainable is sort of a tricky thing because what works now may not work in 5 years, and what works now absolutely didn't work 5 years ago because half of it didn't even exist. I think you should be largely platform agnostic in terms of the way that you think. We are, we Dejobaan are geared towards the PC, but we want to break free of that because if does anybody from Valve work here? Sorry, anybody who works at Valve, I've had too much drink. If Steam becomes the 800-pound gorilla of the PC world, then we are going to have to play by their rules. I do not want that to happen. So as a result, I think we're going to spread into other, into consoles, iPhone, Android, etc., etc. And I also think that allows us a little bit of creative freedom. But we're not like a PC studio. It just happens to be that way now.
I think you go with whatever platform that you can get noticed on. And you got to take that almost on a game-by-game basis, I think. A lot of it, I think, you have to weigh the pluses and minuses, like the Apple platforms. Apple can be a capricious jerk about like approvals and stuff. So you have to take that into account. That's one thing. But if you know a way that you will get noticed, like you know somebody at Apple who wants to get you on the front page, or if you don't have any ins, then I personally say you go with the PC because the PC is a completely open ecosystem. So it really depends. Like how do you plan? Like how big an audience do you need to make another game, and how do you plan to get noticed? And then find the platform that you can execute that plan on.
Yeah, I haven't released yet, so what I'm saying is mostly speculation. But I think any of the platforms is sustainable. I tend to think that the more open the platform is, as you go onto the sort of the iPhone and PC side of things, certainly the more crowded the space is, so being noticed does become really hard. So I tend to think if you were going in that direction, that sort of more frequent releases is something that you would sort of naturally migrate towards, more frequent releases and more of sort of revenue through sustaining content, DLCs and this kind of thing. I wouldn't at this point, for example, make an iPhone game by taking 5 guys and working for 2 years on something. I don't think there are many examples of that being successful. What I have seen is a bunch of bunch of people who do sustain themselves pretty fine on the iPhone by throwing a lot of stuff at the wall, and some stuff sticks. And when it does stick, you sustain the hell out of it. When it doesn't stick, you move on quickly.
Just to follow that up, so in particular, for each of you, which platforms do you avoid? Which ones are you like, we can't do that right now, that doesn't make sense for us?
Apple. I'm not touching Apple with a 10-meter pole at this point in time, because I look at the store and it's very hard to dig into anything that's not popular right now already, because it's very easy to get at, I can see the things that are already big. But how does somebody who likes a game like X, and X is similar to my game, how do they get to me? I want that long tail sort of functionality that Amazon has, and the App Store is really flat that way. It's not helpful. So I look at that and I'm like, okay, so what? I have to curry favor with an entire different ecosystem of journalists and bloggers than I have any contact with, because I don't know the Apple side of things very well. Well, that's a bad move for me, because I already have people that I know and contacts and development in other areas, so I should look at that.
Can I be a dick and say Facebook games? I mean, it's, honestly, that's not because we don't like Facebook games, but we have a core expertise at Dejobaan in that we're tending towards the sort of larger games that you might be able to project against the wall, and maybe within the next year or two that is what Facebook games are, but that's just not where they are now. We don't want to change directions.
I'll be a dick and say PC games. No, actually, I'll say that I will avoid PC only because I'm intimidated by it more than anything. I just sort of personally for myself don't understand the experience of going to a website and downloading an executable and installing it on my precious hard drive with all my precious data. It's kind of a scary thing. Exactly. Even with Steam and online. And so on. So, just in general, getting people to come to a random website or to one of the websites and to find your thing there amongst all the other things that are there, that seems like a really hard problem. And that's why Ichiro is such an inspiration to me.
I just like the way the man dresses. Can I have your shirt?
Yes. Right now.
Next one.
Okay, so something that I personally see a lot online when I read about indie development, or that I hear a lot when I talk to indie developers, is this perception that indie development is more friendly than AAA development or non-indie development, and that there's also less grind than non-AAA development. So is that true? And back up what you're about to say with examples, please. and let's start over here with Damián.
No, I don't think it's true at all. I think things can feel unfriendly if there's a lot of places between you and the top management, the top people who are making decisions that control your life. So it's hard when you're sort of deep in a corporate structure. But my experience so far has been that both ways are extremely friendly, are actually extremely open with information as well. If you go to GDC, you get tons of information about exactly what other people are doing. You find snippets of code, and you find all kinds of information on production practices and so on. So maybe it changes a little bit from one AAA company to the other, but I find in general both communities to be very cohesive,
I guess I find indie development to be friendly because people in general are friendly. Pretty much everybody in this room can walk up to any other person and introduce himself and start a conversation, right? So as Damián said, AAA developers are probably the same way individually, but the difference is that for indie game studios, the studio is very often the small number of people that make up that studio. Dejobaan Games has 3 core team members, so when you talk to Dejobaan Games, you're talking to one of those 3 people, and we're going to talk to you about, the marketing or the development or whatever, and generally we're pretty frank and we're pretty open with our secrets. And the other side of that, which I think is different from what we hear about AAA studios, is that there's a lot of work, but it doesn't feel to me like there's a lot of